Good afternoon. Here we are back at Granny Shares the Bible. I want to share my wonderful King James Bible with you today. And it's starting in Mark 14 and verse 43. And immediately while he yet spake, cometh Judas, one of the 12, and with him a great multitude, with swords and staves, from the chief priests and the scribes and the elders. And he that betrayed him had given him a token, saying, Whomsoever I shall kiss, that same is he. Take him and lead him away safely. And as soon as he was come, he goeth straightway to him and saith, Master, Master, and kissed him. Sounds like he'd done it before. Probably had kissed the master before and called him master. It's sad, isn't it? Yes, it is. Verse 46, And they laid their hands on him and took him. And one of them that stood by drew a sword and smote a servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. And Jesus answered and said unto them, Are you come out as against a thief with swords and with staves to take me? I was daily with you in the temple teaching, and you took me not. But the scriptures must be fulfilled. And they all forsook him and fled. So he was always around them. He was teaching daily in the temple. They didn't bring swords and staves to arrest him then. So he said, Are you come out as against a thief? You know I'm dangerous. He's trying to say, you know that I'm not dangerous. I've been teaching you all this time. But he said the scriptures must be fulfilled. So this is why they came with the swords and the staves in the dark into the garden, with Judas leading them and kissing him. Another place it says, Friend, wherefore art thou come? Jesus said that to him. Oh my. And they all forsook him and fled. 51, And there followed him a certain young man, having a linen cloth cast about his naked body. And the young men laid hold on him, and he left the linen cloth and fled from them naked. Now I believe this young man was Mark. I believe that's why he's mentioned here, because Mark is telling the story. And I believe the young man was Mark. And so even though he had a linen cloth about his naked body, when they grabbed that linen cloth, he left it. They laid hold on him. He left it and ran away from them naked. Verse 53, And they led Jesus away to the high priest, and with him were assembled all the chief priests and the elders and the scribes. So all the authorities had come together in this late night meeting, and they were there with the high priest, the chief priests, the elders, and the scribes. And Peter followed him afar off, even unto the palace of the high priest. And he sat with the servants and warmed himself at the fire. Now, I believe it was Peter that cut the man's ear off. Well, when we study in Luke, let's go over there in Luke and look at that, what it says about the man, that he cut off his ear. And yes, he says, Judas, betrayest thou the Son of Man with a kiss? And it says, And one of them smote the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear. Let's see, in Matthew 26. Let's see what it says. Matthew 26. Peter had a sword, because the Lord told him to take the sword. He meant the word of God, but Peter had a sword. And he said, let's see what it says here in Matthew chapter 26. And behold, one of them which were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew his sword and struck a servant of the high priest and smote off his ear. So, it doesn't say it was Peter then, but let's look at John 18. That's the wonderful part about having the four Gospels, is it fills in the blanks sometimes. John 18, and there's not always ways for you to really understand how to fit it all together sometimes. You can't, but The Lord knows, and he gave us all this information to help us. And let's see what it says. And Simon Peter, yep, I thought so, having a sword, drew it and smote the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. So John gave us more information, and the information was Simon Peter was the one that cut the ear off. Okay, so we know that now, that it was Simon Peter that cut his ear off, and we also know that Jesus healed his ear too. I don't know if he stuck it back on. I don't know what he did, but he did heal it. So perhaps he just grew another one. I mean, with Jesus, all things are possible. And so let's go on from there. And it says, and Peter followed him afar off, even into the palace of the high priest, and he sat with the servants and warmed himself at the fire. So Peter had already had some kind of evening happening. He was in the upper room when Jesus was washing their feet, and he said, "You never wash my feet." So he had that. He had seen Judas take that sop. He had gone out into the garden and fallen asleep while Jesus was praying, and he woke him up 3 times, and then cut off Malchus's ear. I mean, he'd already had some kind of an evening already, and probably was thinking, what else is going to happen? And Peter followed him afar off, even to the palace of the high priest, and he sat with the servants and warmed himself at the fire. And the chief priest and all the council sought for witness against Jesus to put him to death, and found none. For many bare false witness against him, but their witness agreed not together. And there arose certain and bare false witness against him, saying, We heard him say, I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and within 3 days I will build another made without hands. But neither so did their witness agree together. So they did not know what he meant. They didn't know what he meant. They didn't know that he meant he was going to let his temple be destroyed, which was his body, and then raise it back up on the 3rd day, in 3 days. They didn't know what that meant. So there was no way for the witnesses to agree together. Verse 60, And the high priest stood up in the midst and asked Jesus, saying, Answerest thou nothing? What is it which these witness against thee? The high priest had no thought of being respectful to Jesus. Can you imagine? He's God's high priest. It's the Son of God he's standing in front of. And he has no respect. That is amazing, isn't it? When you really think about it. That the very God that they are supposedly being the high priest of, his Son is standing there in front of him. And he has no respect. But he held his peace and answered nothing. Again the high priest asked him and said unto him, Art thou the Christ, the Son of the Blessed? Now wait a minute. How many miracles had Jesus done that they knew he did? He had raised people from the dead. He had fed 5,000 at one time and 4,000 at another time. They knew all about this. And then they asked him straight out, Art thou the Christ, the anointed one, the Son of the Blessed? Because they didn't even speak God's name. They were supposed to be so respectful of him. You know, they wouldn't even speak his name. They had initials for Jehovah. They wouldn't speak his name. So he said, Art thou the Christ, the Son of the Blessed? So he's asking him straight out, and Jesus said, I am. And ye shall see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power, and coming in the clouds of heaven. The Bible said, every eye shall see him. Let's look there. in Revelation. Yes, he lived a long time ago, but let's look where it says it. Behold, he cometh with clouds, and every eye shall see him, and they also which pierced him. And all kindreds of the earth shall wail because of him. Even so, amen. Every eye shall see him. This man, Jesus prophesied it, and it was going to happen. I am. And ye, all of you, high priests, elders, scribes, everybody, ye shall see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of heaven. Then the high priest rent his clothes and saith, What need we any further witness? Ye have heard the blasphemy. What think ye? And they all condemned him to be guilty of death. He rent his clothes, meaning he was declaring as the high priest that Jesus had committed blasphemy. Blasphemy, of course, is saying something irreverently against God. And they were saying because he said he was going to sit on the right hand of power and come in the clouds of heaven, that he'd said something irreverent against God. But no, he hadn't. He told the truth when he said, I am the Christ, the Son of the Blessed. So, ye have heard the blasphemy, they said. The high priest said, What think ye? And they all condemned him to be guilty of death. And some began to spit on him, and to cover his face, and to buffet him, and to say unto him, Prophesy! And the servants did strike him with the palms of their hands. So they were beginning to allow the devil to have his way. One part in the Word, I believe it's in John, one in John, it said that Jesus said, this is Satan's time, his hour of power. I didn't look that up before we got here, but that's what he said. He said he had this hour of power, and the devil did. He was delivered by the Jews into the soldiers' hands and into the high priest and all of them's hands. And this was the hour of power of darkness. And darkness was having having their way with Jesus. Spitting on him, covering his face, buffeting him, and saying to him, Prophesy. And the servants did strike him with the palms of their hands. The servants. And as Peter was beneath in the palace, there cometh one of the maids of the high priest. And when she saw Peter warming himself, she looked upon him and said, And thou also wast with Jesus of Nazareth. I'm sorry, I'm not reading too well today, but I'm going to get through all this maybe by next week. So she said, And thou also wast with Jesus of Nazareth. What a place for him. What a place for Peter. Like I said, he'd been through a lot already. And here he was warming himself, and a maid comes and says, You were also with Jesus of Nazareth. But he denied, saying, I know not, neither understand I what thou sayest. And he went out into the porch, and the cock crew. And a maid saw him again, and began to say to them that stood by, This is one of them. And he denied it again. And a little after, they that stood by said again to Peter, Surely thou art one of them, for thou art a Galilean, and thy speech agreeth thereto. But he began to curse and to swear, saying, I know not this man of whom ye speak. And the second time the cock crew. And Peter called to mind the word that Jesus said unto him, Before the cock crow twice, thou shalt deny me thrice. And when he thought thereon, he wept. Peter had a rough night, didn't he? He thought he was stronger than he was. He wasn't strong. Sometimes we think we're strong. And I know there's times when we ought to be strong and we're not. But did Jesus give up on Peter? I'm going to go and we'll start back on chapter 15 tomorrow. God bless you.